Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and for watching my MtoA series. Today's video will be focused on incandescence objects and shaders, which means self-illumination. In Arnold there are two types. One is emission based from a shader and the other one is mesh light, which is a geometry which is set to be a light, so we've got all the proper light attributes which you would have on an area light. And on the guide page of Solid Angle, there is actually quite a lot of detail. What's the best way to use? Is it emission or is it a mesh light? And they've got good comparisons about render times and noise levels. I would always recommend to use a mesh light, but there are some situations where an emissive shader is better. For instance, if you've got a big mesh and you have a texture which only certain objects should be emissive, for instance something like this where you only have the red hot lava is emitting light, and for kind of stuff like that emissive shaders are better and they deliver good enough results. The big limitation of emissive shaders is that they don't produce proper ray traced shadows, which means it does not really work for environment shaders and other stuff to get proper shadows and light reflections. So to jump right in, I have an empty Maya scene with a plane, and I just first want to show you how to set it up. So I create two spheres. Excuse me. Let's just do this again. Create sphere, scale it up. And we've got another one. So these will be, one will be a mesh light, the other one will be an emissive shader. You can use AL shader, the AL surface, or you can use the AI standard, which I will be using in this video. So assign new material, AI standard, and this is just my basic shader, nothing special. At the bottom you see emission. This is where you control the intensity and the color which you want to emit from. And for the sphere, on each geo shape node you have an Arnold tab, and in there you have the option to change the translator. And in there you've got mesh light. Nothing will change. You will just open up a light attribute rollout for this shape node. So let's start the render. So immediately you see nothing. So first thing, let's tweak the mesh light. So you want to, I always like to disable normalize, which just means the light is not changing with scale when it's on. So when it's off, when you scale the size of the object, the light gets stronger or less intense. So, and then you just have the exposure control to adjust your intensity of the light source. You have the option to make it visible, which we will do for now. And we just have a exposure of 2. And for the emissive shader at the bottom, let's increase the scale to 1. And this is the difference there is. So if I try to get the same intensity more or less, let's try 4. And then we have kind of the same intensity. And you can see that the shader looks actually cleaner. But this is because on the mesh light, we don't have any light samples set up. So light samples to 3, and we should get a cleaner result, a bit cleaner. So this is the main thing, how you set it up. And then you can easily, if you want, for instance, a different color for the light, you can just create a checkerboard like so. And let's say we want a green light and we want a pink light, and then you get a fancy light representation. And you can plug in the same checkerboard into the mesh light. If I find my node editor, Windows, node editor, there we go. So let's see what we got here. That's a checker, and let's do this again. So we've got both, and on the shape I will connect the checker. Let's see if this will work. And we start Arnold again. Yeah. So this is left is the emissive shader. On the right you have the mesh light. And by the way, I'm using the latest Arnold, which is at this time of recording 1.4, which has some nice features like portal lights and curvature shaders, but this doesn't matter for this tutorial. So this is how you set your incandescence up, and you can see that on the shader side, you actually can see some uh, Lambert shader on top, so you can actually drive, for instance, the specularity and whatnot on the shader. So this is now without the Lambert model, and let's increase the reflection, and you can actually get a reflective emissive shader. So you would see actually the reflection. You can't do this on the mesh light, by the way. That's also a difference between the both. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I will show you my prepared scene, which is my first time using Mesh. So I did nothing too special, but it looks kind of cool. It's like a slogan. Not sure if it's readable, but there is like a text being written written like glow. And we've got two options for this. So the one is we use these tiny cubes to each be emissive shader, or we use a mesh light. And I like to use mesh lights because we get proper representation of shadow rays. So to do this, as I showed you before, you just switch the translator from polymesh to mesh light. And I want to start the render. There we go. Did I actually do something already? Oh, I have a shader applied already. So my bad. Let's assign Lambert 1, so it's black, how it should be. And the color information comes from the mesh attributes. So if you create a mesh light, the color disappears. And I'm not sure really if you can get this to working. I tried because the color information is based or written into the shader and not into the shape, so I couldn't use user data to drive the color for my light. So that is not a really bad thing, but this is just how it looks with a mesh light, and you can still control the exposure, everything, and you can also increase or decrease the samples. So let's scrub through the time, and then you can see it should be updating, which it does not. So let's check if this updates better. No, let's try again then. So yeah, you can see a G, and really just in my previous tests it was updating when I was scrubbing. Interesting. Anyways, so this is now just a mesh light, and let's switch back again to the shaded version. So to get this to work, Mesh outputs certain user attributes or primvars, and to get access to them, you would need to create a AI user data which reads from the Mesh output. So let's assign a AI standard, and for the color, this is now a bit different approach. You wouldn't set one color to get the color info. You would set a let's find it, shader AI user data color, and in here you would write color set, which is a fixed attribute name from Mesh. So let's see if we get the color. No, because it's not emissive yet. If you right click here on these arrows, you can actually get a menu which is faster to access your stuff. A nice little trick. No diffuse, no spec, and going to emission. There you go. Now you've got your colored emissive shader. And if you want to change a color in Mesh, for instance, you have the color and you can do whatever color you want and it just updates. You can have different hue shifts, all this kind of magic, which is really fast to update and nice to work with. And I think if you get better in Mesh, it's really powerful. But honestly, I don't have the time, and honestly, I'm not an animator or motion designer, so I don't really care. And so what's next? I wanted to do something more glowy, so I wanted to use AI volume scattering, which is like a dust effect for an environment shader. So I have an atmosphere and I want to connect AI volume scattering or create one. If it's not here, you need to create one. So I have one already in place. These are my settings for that. And that's one limitation. The shader approach does not really cast rays, so you wouldn't get the environment shader to work properly. So to get this to work, going back to the shape of the mesh object and enabling the mesh light again. Unfortunately, it's not a beautiful color, or it's just a uniform color, not a random hue shift. So now we have actually a environment fog. As you can see, it's really eerie. And if I would change the intensity of the light, you would get a better example or idea what I'm talking about. So let's bring up the exposure. I changed the normalize mode so we don't have a strong emission just yet. And the light is visible. If it's not visible, you hardly see it. You just see the fog. Make it visible again. And I want to use color temperature. So this is now my blue cubes, or whatever you want to call them. 12. Oh, let's actually just disable this and use a nice pink color. There we go. That's beautiful. And then in your environment shader, volume scattering, you can actually adjust how strong the scattering effect is using the density slider. So the smaller the density, the less of a glow you get. So this is now my subtle glow. If it's too noisy, the only thing you can do is increase the samples in here in the volume scattering or the AA samples. You can actually, I think, disable all of these guys and just work with the AA samples. And the render takes a while, but it will get kind of clean. So then you have, I just have a wall in the background so you can actually see what's happening. There you go. There's your nice glow. Oops. Let's switch to my other camera. Really, is that the one? Let's see if it updates now. It does not. Okay, so this is now what the effect looks like. Glow. And then I have already also a cylinder, which is this guy. I just extruded along the curve to get a glow text. And if I want to make the text glowing as well, I just switch this to mesh light and maybe choose the same color. Then we get this glowing sign. Update. Yeah, and this is all there is to incandescence. Obviously, you can create way nicer effects than I just did. For instance, you can have like a tunnel, like for the cars, and then you have, I don't know, color incandescence light bulbs floating around the objects or whatever. Be imaginative and create some nice effects. If you want, you can show them to me. I can give you some comments on them if you like to. But honestly, the incandescence is not a really difficult task to set up. It's just either, again, via shader or via mesh lights. They are a bit expensive, so it takes a while to get it clean, but the result looks then very nice if you get it to work properly. So let's just try to increase the intensity some bit more. Let's try. There we go, a pretty nice glowing sign. And if, for instance, let's say you wanted to create a flickering effect, you can do it with an expression, or you can just keyframe the intensity so it's going on, off, or whatever. Just, I don't know. Yeah, whatever you want, you can actually do pretty quick with the effect. And these guys, here you can disable if it should affect the volumetrics or not to create that nice glow effect. Now it's disabled, and now it's just being emitting onto the wall. And yeah, this is the whole glory and the whole tutorial. I hope I could give you a nice introduction how to set this kind of stuff up. Yeah, and let me see if you produce something nice. Thank you guys for watching, and if you haven't done so, there are several other tutorials on my website already, which are a bit hidden. They are, where are they? Videos. Oh, actually, I have a playlist as well. I've got a playlist with all my fancy tutorials. Lots of them. Like, they are pretty old, honestly, so some of them may not be applicable anymore. For instance, I think the fly through is a bit old. There are better ways to do things today because I recorded them, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. But still, some of them are still very helpful. Quick tips, for instance, are quite cool. Yeah, and again, thank you guys, and I really like your support, and I'm really happy that my stuff is so helpful to you guys. And if you have any further suggestions for tutorials or any other ideas, please let me know. I will try, and I will, yeah, try to be helpful. Thank you guys.